Hot 91, your choice for hip-hop and R&B soul. Hello there. It is time for a brand new episode of Hampton Roads Voices. Woohoo! Oh, yes. And tonight's episode, I might not sound like this as the show continues because, you know, this topic that we're going to be talking about is frustrating. It's a whole lot of things, okay? I can list so many things that it is, and it's needed also to talk about it, okay? So we are asking you to call in and to share your thoughts and share your ideas and share your opinions, because I know that this is one of the topics that you really, really want to talk about. This episode is entitled Acquitted Once Again, and we are talking about the Philando Castie shooting and the acquittal of the officer Jeronimo Yanez in Minnesota, and everything that came with it. Okay, so I have some very special guest experts in the studio with me today to help facilitate the conversation and to get you guys thinking and get you guys talking and to get some solutions going on. All right, we have Dr. Robert Perkins. He is not a visitor whatsoever. He is at home. Okay, the chair of NSU Sociology Department. Hello, Dr. Perkins.
Hello, Hampton Roads.
Yes, thank you for being here again. They know you. They know you.
And I love them.
Yes, and we love you. And also we have a brand new guest here, Dr. Antipas Harris. He's a professor, a preacher, and a community leader, among other things. Hello, Dr. Harris.
Hello. It's a blessing to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. Okay. And then we have you, Hampton Roads. Yes, give us a call, 823-9110. Anything that you want to say having to do with this case, the acquittal. How do you feel about it? What were your thoughts? That's one thing I want to know. We'll start off with that. Hampton Roads, what were your thoughts about the acquittal of Officer Jeronimo Yanez in Minnesota when he was charged with, shooting and killing Philando Castie? 823-9110, or get in where you fit in on Twitter and Facebook using the hashtag HRV. Okay? All right. So just a brief overview, and fellas, please, you can jump in at any time to correct me, but just a brief overall summary of what had happened. So, it was supposed to be a very regular traffic stop. The officer Jeronimo Yanez pulled over Philando Castie. He was driving his car with his girlfriend in the passenger seat and her young daughter in the back. He asked him for his license. Philando Castie, Mr. Castile, told him that he had a gun on him, and he has a license. Is that correct? He told him that he had a license. Okay. And the officer, long story short, the officer thought that he was reaching for a weapon, and he actually told him to not reach for the weapon. Him and the girlfriend, him as in Mr. Castile and the girlfriend, was trying to tell the cop that we're not reaching for the weapon. We're just reaching for our license. And Officer Yanez discharged 5 shots into Philando Castie. And then, all hell broke loose after that. That's about right.
That's about right. But
please.
Officer Yanez had his partner with him. So it was 2 officers on the scene at the time. And in addition to that, they requested to see his license and registration. So according to reports from both sides, he was reaching for something. According to Philando's girlfriend, he was reaching for the license and registration. But according to the officers, they weren't sure. Right. Because he had already announced that he was a licensed firearm carrier, and he did have a firearm in his possession.
Yes.
By the way, which is the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
That is the right thing to do.
And there are, just reading over articles and reading just over a whole lot of things when it was happening. It's just a lot of different twists and turns and versions of the story. Not the prosecution, but the defendant said that the officers smelled marijuana. They had suspected he was a robbery suspect or something like that because he fit the description. A whole lot of things. And then the prosecution said that he was actually not actually acting like he was high. He was very what's the word I'm looking for? He not responsive. It's the word I'm looking for, and of course, it's not going to come to me right now. Now that I need it.
Well, he was appropriate.
He was appropriate, yeah.
For the stop that he had encountered, and keep in mind, they pulled him over because there was a robbery that occurred earlier between. It was another male and female, according to the officer.
Gotcha.
But it was interesting because when the officer told his side of the story, he said that he was concerned about the issue and that Philando would shoot him because he disregarded his own daughter. He thought it was his daughter, even though I think it was his stepdaughter, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
His girlfriend daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said if he disregard that young girl by smoking weed in front of her,
Right.
that he would take his life. So that's what caused him to have fear for his life, and that's why he thought he was reaching for a gun.
Okay.
And that's according to his testimony.
Right. That is according to his testimony. We do have 2 calls, but before we get into the calls, I want our guests to tell the people why they're on this show. Okay. Now, you all as in Hampton Roads, know that we always pull qualified, legit expert guests. They know what they're talking about, okay? And of course, we know Dr. Robert Perkins, but if you can just tell them a little bit about what you have done. You've done plenty of events about this and on campus and off campus. And yeah, just tell the people, Dr. Perkins.
Yes, well, this is my passion. I want to create a safe, healthy community for all to live in. And the community side of this whole issue is very important to me because there are so many African Americans that are scared, literally scared, not nervous, but scared to walk around in their own neighborhoods. And they're not scared of each other, they're scared of the police. And where do you go if the people that are supposed to provide the safe haven and the proper nourishment for a healthy community is breaking down? Where do you go? How do you make it fit in? So that has been my charge. That's my passion. Yes, as you said, I've been published in this area. I've done a lot of community forums in this area. I'm currently on the FIP group, which is the Fair and Impartial Training, which Dr. Harris is also a part of, for the City of Norfolk Police Department. And we have made great gains with them to start to see things from the community perspective and how this fear can be minimized.
That's awesome.
And so that's the nutshell of what I am. And I do have a PhD in sociology.
Yes. Don't forget that. Okay. Receipts. All right.
Okay. That was me. Now wait till you hear this brother talk. Okay.
And Dr. Antipas Harris, like I said, professor, preacher, and community leader. Just tell the people a little bit about what you do.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm the Dean of the Urban Renewal Center, the founder and Dean of the Urban Renewal Center here in Norfolk. And some of the things we do are building coalitions, community engagement, and also education is key for us. I teach at a number of universities. My area is theology, but practical theology. So it has to do with where faith and community intersect. That's what I'm interested in, church and society. And so issues of concern like the one we're talking about are very much heavy on my heart because it raises the questions. It's one question: where does a faith community connect with these issues? And many people, particularly from the Black Lives Matter group, they're really critical of the faith community because nationally, the faith community has been rather silent on issues that matter in the streets. And I see myself as a champion for the community, and I am in the streets with the community. And I ask the question, what does faith have to do with this? And is there a way that private public partnerships can happen to help mediate conflict, de-escalate situations, and maybe contribute in a powerful way for common good? And so Dr. Perkins and I, as he said, are on the FIP with the police department. Also, the police department here in Norfolk has an initiative called Clergy Patrol, where on Friday and Saturday nights, clergy from all the city are out there with the police. And I think it's a powerful statement that we care. And so as a theologian myself, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a theologian. People like Cornel West has a religious background. The people who have thought deeply about this, some of the people who have thought deeply about this have thought about it with a background like mine. And also, Martin Luther King Jr. got his doctorate from Boston University, and so did I.
All right. Receipts, like I said. And you know what?
Martin Luther King was an alpha, and so am I.
He's from Atlanta. Well, I'm from Georgia. Not quite Atlanta, but I'm from Georgia.
Close enough. But you know what? You'll be a really great fit for another show that I have in the works. So, Dr. Harris, glad to have you on. All right, let's get to these phone lines. 823-9110. I want to know, Hampton Roads, how you feel about the acquittal of Officer Jeronimo Yanez in the shooting and killing of Philando Castie. All right, let's get to the phone lines. Hi, 91, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
Stacy.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How do you feel about the acquittal of Officer Jeronimo Yanez?
I'm not surprised about the acquittal because as Black people, many years, you can date it all the way back, we're not the people that are really cared about because we're not of Caucasian skin or whatever. So I'm not surprised, but I feel like the Black people, we have to wake up and stand up for each other because I seen the whole thing, how it happened when she put it on Facebook. And I mean, for the officer to ask him for his ID and registration and all that, and then he go and get it and shoot him was just something out of another playbook that happened in 1920 or something. So that whole thing is just, it's crazy. And us Black people, we have to stick together and get these Black men jobs out here because I heard the one, I don't know what his name was, but he was talking about how the faith community could help.
Dr.
And
Harris.
I just feel like the way the faith community could help is developing some jobs for these young men because that's the big deal. When you don't have nothing to do, you're going to do crazy things. Not saying that he has anything to do with that, but that's just my whole big thing because I've seen it with young people in my family, in my neighborhood. That's when they do crazy stuff or be out here just smoking weed and all that. That's where it comes from and stems from.
I thank you for your comment and thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. And we do have one more call, but she did say, get these young men jobs, and I do agree. But let's be clear, Philando Castie had a job.
Yes, he did.
He had a job, and he had a legit job, even though the defendants try to say that he was a drug dealer. That's what I read at one point, too. They kind of skimmed by it in this particular article that he was selling weed or what have you. But he actually worked as a cafeteria worker. Was it an elementary school? I'm not sure.
I know it was in a public school
It
system.
was in a public school
And he had
system.
just actually got promoted to supervisor.
Okay. So, yeah, there's that. All right, 823-9110. And just to be clear, I keep saying that he was acquitted for shooting and killing, but the official charge that Officer Jeronimo Yanez was charged with was second-degree manslaughter and endangering safety by discharging a firearm. All right, one more call, and let's see. Hi, 91, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
This is Ashley.
Hi, Ashley. What's your comment, question, or concern?
Hi. I feel that, of course, it was wrong. And, I do a lot of community work. I'm a counselor. So when I'm out here talking to people, it's really important for people to recognize that this isn't something that just occurred. We come from a long, long traumatic history here in the United States. And I feel that police are kind of given that title of superiority and power, and they constantly abuse it. And I say to people all the time, they talk about gangs a lot, but the biggest gang in the United States is the police, the military, and the government. And when you say things like that, depending on who you're talking to, people look at you like you're crazy. But if you think about it in all actuality, if it was the other way around, if Philando was the one who pulled out a weapon or fired a weapon, he would have been fired from his job on site. There wouldn't have been a second thought about it. But with police officers, when they actually take human life, they're not held to that same standard as a person who works at McDonald's and gets your order wrong and get an attitude and now they lost their job. So they go on these administrative leaves. They're still getting paid. They have people funding them. And it's not enough to just say, oh, well, we need to all come together. Yes, we do need to come together, but we need to recognize the system that we live in and how it is set up to go against us. And I think that's what people are still failing to realize. Everyone wants to live in this fantasy world that, oh, America the Great, oh, well, he was doing this, he was doing that, and they don't recognize that we are still, rightly so, fighting a racist slave system. And so I feel that with his acquittal, it was just like any other police officer who has gotten away with taking someone's life and there has been no reprimandation at all. So I feel like it was very wrong. I feel like another life has been lost, another family has been destroyed, and now here this officer is free to roam when he is a killer because you did kill someone. And it wasn't that Philando got out of the car and ran to attack him. He was in his car.
Right.
And it was children and a female in the car, and you fired, and their excuse all the time is, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. Well, what's the point of you going to training and being an officer if you're not trained to deal with high-risk situations, which in the situation, he wasn't even high-risk. So I think it's more so about changing the policies and the overall system structure of police enforcement, because when we look back on it, police was actually slave patrol here in the U.S. So we have to really keep all of those things into consideration, and I think people try to look at it with a blind eye because they really don't want to face the reality that we still are living in times of slavery, basically. So I think it was wrong, and I think, it's just another thing that they kind of swipe under the rug and kind of got away with. And I think as a people, we need to be more aware of exactly that we are under attack. And I think once we get in our minds that, hey, we really do have enemies out here, not just ourselves, but we really do have an enemy, and it is the system itself. Because you look at it from that Officer Tommy who goes throughout the community, they have stopped him from making those videos. Why would you discipline someone for making videos showing them being involved in the community, but when it comes to videos of police killings, it's like you want to throw that under the rug? So everyone has a motive, but I do think that law enforcement plays a major role in how they interact with people, and they basically are like the gang because they don't lose their jobs. In Norfolk, they put together the CIT, which is basically crisis intervention team, and they're training police officers how to deal with mental health calls and so forth. I know Philando wasn't a mental health call, but it's to say, wow, you can really graduate from school and you can go out and you can get a badge and a gun, but you really have no training on how to deal with people. So your first instinct is, hey, let me pull a gun. But if you and I were on the street and we said, hey, I felt unsafe for my life and I pull out a gun and I kill someone, the outcome is going to be completely different. Mm-hmm. We're 9 times out of 10 going to go to jail. So I think people need to really wake up and recognize that, hey, the system is still flawed. And if we know that we need to carry ourselves a certain way, then we should do such. We should know, not to say we should live in fear, but we should recognize that these people have not been trained to look at us as human beings.
Well, thank you for your comment, Ashley. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Look, I'm about to talk your head off.
You made some great points. Have a good weekend. I appreciate that.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ashley did make some great points. One of the things she said, there was a lot of happenings going on, and this is continuous. In year 2016, 963 people were shot and killed by the police. Out of the 963, 250 of them were African-American males. In the 250 that were African-American males, let me see my stats here, I believe 105 were unarmed. So those statistics do not lie. So there is something that's still very wrong happening. And keeping in mind, we are disproportionately representing the United States of America.
Yeah. We're
13% of the total population. But yet we are hosting the majority of the spots in prison by like 75%. And these ongoing shootings. So when you look at it in terms of percentage-wise, and even when you break it down per state, African Americans are overwhelmingly disproportionately mistreated in the criminal justice system. And let me look at this number here. The highest number of victims per state is New Jersey.
Wow.
And New Jersey hosts 2 of the most poorest communities, African American communities in the nation. Now, is this a coincidence? I don't know. But the stats do not lie. So there is something that's happening. So I really appreciate what Ashley said about the system and that we need to address the system. Mm-hmm. Whether the system is racist or not, I honestly can't see how people will argue that it's not, that there is not a bias built into the system.
I think, though, it's important that when we talk about the system is racist, we're not simply saying white people are out there wanting to kill black people and hate black people. Usually the conversation goes to, are you friendly to somebody from another race? I think we need to have a clear understanding of what we mean by racism. First of all, everybody can't be racist. The racism itself was born out of a system that believed that Caucasians were superior to black. That blacks, it was the Caucasian people who said black people of another race. So embedded in that system that undermined African American humanity, it built itself into the American system where we were not even fully human. It's part of the DNA of this country.
Yeah.
We can't romanticize the racist history of this country. And it doesn't get focused on and really unearthed in the curriculums in our schools. It's not talked about with the heinous history that history, it takes sometimes hundreds of years for this type of stuff to really play itself out. So we've been deceived to think that somehow in the 60s, when we were able to vote, everything started to change. When reality is embedded in the system is a systemic racism. The system itself plays itself out the way it was intended to play itself out. In these distressed communities, right? In these poverty-stricken communities, disproportionately, they are black.
Well, not really. Not really. The spotlight is on the African American poor communities. But when you look at poor communities abroad, the majority of them are not black.
Yeah, that's why I changed my language to the distressed communities.
Yeah.
Because poor doesn't mean distress. Poor doesn't mean necessarily poverty. But what I'm saying is that if you look across the country, the places where you have the most challenges, and you're right, the spotlight is put on, are disproportionately in African American communities, because connected to that is drugs, connected to that is joblessness and crime. They all come together. When you look across the country, right, and you look, where are the crimes? You just said one in New Jersey. You said, come on, you said those are what kind of communities?
Those are where majority of African American.
Right,
but
and they're
here's
black,
the
right?
thing. Yeah, they are.
And they're poverty-stricken, right?
Yes. But here's the other part.
Oh, it's going to be a live conversation over here with you, Dr. Perkins.
Hampton voices.
But the part where I split with you is when we talk about drug infested, I'm using heavy laden terms here, but we think black. But we don't think about those communities where all of the what's that drug methamphetamines are going.
Right.
You know, see, when black people get on drugs, they make some bad decisions and they're bad people and they need to be put away. When other groups of people, the majority, make the same decision, then all of a sudden we need to have a united front on how to combat opiates.
Yeah.
There's a difference. So why are you locking up my brothers and sisters and giving your brother and sister treatment?
You make a good point, and that's exactly right. I think that's stretching the conversation, though, because that is true. That is absolutely true. But those methamphetamine, they're not necessarily in poverty-stricken communities. There are people with wealth who have that problem. There are people. Right. So that's a connected conversation. But what I'm saying is the high concentrations of poverty includes poor, addictions, the situation of being poor, addictions, joblessness, single family homes,
yes,
So
tell me the difference between that and trailer park communities.
I have not done the stats, but I'd be willing to bet.
I can help you out.
Well, hold on. Okay. I would say that there are less of them than they are these high concentration of poverty in black communities. Mm-hmm. Now those communities are connected. We're not making a case that somehow because somebody live in the trailer park community, they're better than the people who live in the. No, I'm not saying that at all. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying.
No, yeah, you're not saying that.
Oh, good. I just want to be sure.
No, it didn't come out that way. But the argument remains. When we talk about the impoverished communities where it is concentrated with African American, they get a different type of microscope on them than those other communities.
That is true. That is true.
Well, we have got.
Are you cutting us off?
Yes, I am. That is true. We have got them to agree. No. Hampton Rose Voices is live right now, and as you can hear, we are having a very heated conversation, and heated in a good way. Okay, this is what we want you to do. We want you thinking. We want you talking. We want you sharing your ideas on this here platform. This episode is called "Acquitted" once again, and we are talking about the Philando Castie shooting, especially about the acquittal of Officer Jeronimo Yanez. He was charged with a second-degree manslaughter and endangering safety by discharging a firearm in the shooting, which happened to kill Philando Castie. I have Dr. Robert Perkins here. He is the chair of NSU's Sociology Department, and also Dr. Antipas Harris. He's a professor, preacher, community leader, and Khilo. That would be me. So I'm going to tell you what. That's right. I'm going to tell you what. We're going to take a quick break, just so everybody can take a breather, gather their thoughts, and we will be right back to continue this conversation. We want to hear from you. 823-9110, 823-9110. And if you're on the phone, just hold on tight for me, all right? It's Hot 91. Yes, we are the one, Hot 91. Your choice for hip hop and R&B soul. Tonight's episode of Hampton Roads Voices is brand new, and it is entitled Acquitted Once Again. Acquitted Once Again. We're talking about the Philando Castie shooting and the acquittal of Officer Jeronimo Yanez. He was acquitted of his second-degree charge his charge of second-degree manslaughter and endangering safety by discharging a firearm in the shooting. We do have a couple calls, so let's go ahead and get to our phone lines. Hi, 91. Who am I speaking with? You're live on the air.
This is Chad Smith. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mr. Smith.
Okay, well, behold the green and gold. I'm a graduate of 1992, and I just want to say I'm very, very proud of your show. I wish you had it on more than just Fridays, and I like your panelists that you have today.
Thank you.
My only question is a question to the panelists. It is clearly through social media, first of all, that Officer Yanez was guilty. Clearly. And, social media shows this. But the pathology of acceptance that we see within this community, within our black community, to just continue to accept all of these verdicts that do not hold the police officers accountable. And then I believe your second panelist, he has a theological perspective and from community affairs. What I want to ask both of your panelists are, I believe God is showing these things through the internet because everyone can see it clearly across the world. But what I want to know is that when are we going to no longer accept these verdicts and be able to, I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's just not acceptable. And I want to know how and what are the steps to take away this acceptance of these non-guilty verdicts. It's too many. And we clearly see it every day on social media, on TV, and the black community continues to accept this. I'm trying to find one officer that was found guilty and charged for murder. I mean, for Officer Yanez to have that as manslaughter and to have the child come out the back of the car. This, again, it's the pathology of acceptance is sickening, and I think there's something wrong within all communities, but particularly in the black community, to continue to accept this because anyone who speaks out against this is looked at in a way, no, you shouldn't be pushing that type of agenda of resistance. And so I just want to just approach that question to your panelists.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to do, we're only 13% of the population. We need to speak loudly. We need to get involved in legislation. We need to be involved in the processes that create and recreate systems, because the systems are created for the people that it protect. And one of the issues is we say, well, the officer was acquitted. Well, yeah, he was acquitted for the specific charge. It doesn't mean that he was right in what he did. He was acquitted for the specific charge, and the justification that's given is a legal justification, not a moral one, not one that addresses the issue that was not part of a legal process. We got to understand that just because it's legal does not mean it's ethical.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
We live in a country that was legally oppressive to African Americans for many years. Correct. So the laws that are still in place do not account for the type of implicit bias that played itself out in that shooting. So what we have is a product of a system that was only structured and contemplated the type of situation that acquitted this officer. The problem we have with this, when we look at that, is a moral problem. The law is not always moral.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not so sure if African Americans accept it. I think we feel powerless about it.
Okay, good. Okay, good response. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think that powerlessness comes from a history of oppression, of a history of being dismissed, a history of brutality. But never once I think that we said, oh, it's okay. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I don't think that has happened. I'm reminded of slave revolts. And oftentimes the history book talk about slave revolts after they got to the United States of America. They don't talk about the fact that there were enslaved Africans on those ships revolting. That's why they had to take them other places before they brought them here
to America,
because they were jumping off ships, they were fighting back, they were doing all these other things until they would change and just diminish to the point that they could not use that power. So a metaphor could be, this is how we're feeling today. We feel powerless. We feel chained. We feel like we can't exercise the God-given gifts that we have in American society and live to be okay and tell about it.
Yeah, and
There's-
because
That's so correct. That is so correct.
and after you hear that verdict, it's like, okay, well, that's it. Like, what can we do? Like,
Right.
what can we do?
And I think that's where my comment came in terms of the actual acceptance. I like what you're saying, powerless, but I guess I'm asking you two gentlemen, of what agenda can we eliminate this powerlessness and these constant verdicts? Because it's becoming, as I say, from a perspective, very sickening.
Well, I want to go back to what Dr. Harris said about legislation. I know it's boring. It's not exciting to talk about that. But the power to vote is very important. We had two candidates last year. One had a formula to address this nationally. So whenever these incidents happen, it would be addressed nationally, no longer locally or state, nationally. So therefore, we could actually link all of these happenings across the entire nation and get to the bottom of it, or allow the federal government to deal with these issues. But as long as they remain local and in the state, you have these police officers who best friends are the prosecutor.
Absolutely.
And I might be, stretching it a little bit, but they do work together. They work together every day.
They know the judges.
They know the judges, know the whole criminal justice system. That's how the criminal justice works. So I really thought potential candidate Hillary Clinton's plan to make this a national and federal issue was the way to go. But we chose differently in the United States of America. And because of that, we're going to have to do it locally. I really applaud Kenneth Alexander, our mayor in the city of Norfolk. He passed a policy within the city of Norfolk Police Department. If there is any police-involved shooting, that the state would come in and do the investigation. So the department would not be investigating itself. An outside entity will be.
That makes sense.
But again, I want to say that I affirm and I applaud the mayor for that as well. But the issue goes beyond investigation, because when one investigates, they investigate based on a system of what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And what I'm saying is that the items, the ideological superstructure that frame the judgment system on whether something is appropriate is in itself flawed. Because that's what happened in these shootings. They were investigated, but the issue is what they considered appropriate was not what we see when we see that. We see something differently than the ideological framework that made the judgment that he should be acquitted. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, because we see the person, but what Mr. Smith is saying, and I agree with you totally, what Mr. Smith is saying, that there is something wrong with the system to allow these things to happen.
Exactly.
And I think in the interaction itself, there's still this stereotype that African Americans fight against every day of our lives.
Every day of our
lives. And this hyper masculinity issues and the way that they see us. And so I'm a big guy. And so I walk into the room and people can be afraid just because I walked into the room.
And because you're black.
And because when you wrap all of those social locations together, you get this bubble of confusion and fear. You know what I'm saying?
And it's true, because I wear a bow tie most times, and a suit and all that, but I'm always reminded that I have a bicultural reality. When I'm out and I'm a professor, that's one culture.
Yes.
When I go home and put on my hoodie and run in the neighborhood in the winter, I'm just like Trayvon Martin.
Absolutely.
So, I have to remind myself, when you run in tonight, I can't say what I remind myself, but you fill it out.
All right, Mr. Smith, thank you so much for your call.
Just one quick question. Do you have these interviews audio taped, or is there a way that you can listen to this again?
You know what I'm going to do, Mr. Smith, because I also do produce this show. I think I'm going to start a YouTube channel in which you guys can go back and, dissect it and digest it and share with your friends. So, yes, just be on the lookout for that. I do appreciate the support.
Yes, excellent show, and keep up the good work. And at the end of the show, please mention where these gentlemen work at again, because you may want to do some things in the future with them. Great show today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, bye.
We do have another call. Intern Chris. All right, one more call. And before we get to that call, I want to hear from you guys a little bit more. Now, let's try to play devil's advocate. I know it's hard with a dead man. Sorry to be so frank, but Mr. Castile is no longer with us, and his life was taken at the hands of this officer. But let's try. So, the officer claimed to be quote unquote afraid for his life, and so he pulled his weapon because he thought that Mr. Castile was reaching for his weapon. Do you think this may have been justified, and if not, what could have been done differently to de-escalate, the situation or anything?
Well, first of all, your question was, do I think that it was justified?
Do you think he had a legit justification for pulling his own weapon?
Or to feel fear. That's
a fear, right.
I honestly don't. I cannot, within my mind, understand. Of course, I was not there. I only saw the video. I heard the tone that Philando Castie had when he announced that he had a firearm. An officer who's living in this country that affirms the carrying of firearms, right? You can carry your weapon, should not be alarmed when somebody tell them that I have a firearm.
That's true.
So to me, I don't even understand the panic, right? And you had just said, give me your license. So you can't now assume he was reaching for a gun. He just told you in calm voice that he had. That speaks to the breakdown of something else. And I'm saying, because as a black man, this is something that we deal with all the time, he must have thought that because he's a black man, and this whole thing about smelling marijuana and all that, I just don't buy it. If he smelled like marijuana, people who smoke marijuana don't go out shooting people. I mean, come on.
Right.
That just is a different argument to demean the man's character in order to make people believe that somehow he was a bad guy. I know how that works. That's a psychological move. It doesn't work. That interaction was absolutely despicable, and that should never be affirmed as appropriate.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. I lecture and I also train on emotional intelligence, meaning manage your emotions so that you can make the best responses. And I've made a proposal to the City of Norfolk Police Department. They haven't gotten back to me yet because I think each one of their officers need to take a training in emotional intelligence. Divorce yourself from your emotions.
That's
or make
right.
sure that your emotions are in check, quote unquote. So when you approach, that you know that whatever you're feeling is not poured into the situation.
Yeah.
Because emotions, if nothing else, emotions are messy. And they cause the workforce to be cluttered with messiness. So how do you divorce emotions? You cannot ever expect anyone to walk around without having any emotion. That's just unrealistic. So what we try to teach them is how to make sure that your emotions are being used adequately, not to spill over into a particular incident. So therefore, that it stay in control. Now, do I think that this guy was in fear of his life at the time that he shot? I believe that he believed that he was in fear. I don't think there was any rational thought behind it. But I think this guy went up, stopped him because he heard of a robbery. He thought that there was a robbery, and everything that isn't, and let's go back to the racial bias, everything that's in his mind that he ever thought about black people, particularly in that neighborhood, rose into the front of his mind. So while this gentleman, law-abiding citizen, exercising his God-given and his legal rights, affirmed in the most rational voice, he still was siphoning out everything that was in his head. And he responded to what was in his head and not what was going on in the actual incident at the time that he shot. He killed. And guess what? It's because he was not emotionally intellect.
All right. And with that being said, let's go to the phones. 91, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
Sophia.
Hey, Sophia. What's your question?
How you doing? I don't have a question. I just have a statement because y'all got me hallelujah and amen and I can't drive my car from listening to this wonderful conversations. I just want to say this. One of those very wise gentlemen who I love when they come on the show. I love you both so much. You said that it's threaded in America, this racism that we see every day. I mean, whether it's in your workplace or whether it's the one of those unfortunate, beautiful brothers that have been killed at the hands of the threaded-in racism. I have to take the angry woman approach to this right now, and I'm sorry because we cannot change, we will never change the racism that is abundant in this country. We won't. We can't change who we are, and to me, that's what they're trying to do. The police officers, and don't get me wrong, I know they're good police officers. I'm not talking about all,
right?
But those chosen few, I'll call them, who think that if I use the overseer mentality and I let all of the other ones see how this one gets treated, I can keep them all under control. You know, to me, that is all it is. And every time I see one of these unfortunate killings, murders, and somebody gets off for it, and then I see the others who get out and they're cursing, they have weapons, you know, they're fighting back, and wow, they make it home safely that afternoon with bail. No, I'm not willing to accept that you are so afraid of an individual who is sitting in the car. You have your weapon pointed at them. He has no weapon pointed at you. He's either on the ground, he's getting beat up, he's got his back to you. However it's done, and you're afraid simply because it's a black man. No, I'm not buying it anymore. I don't want all of the rationalizations. What I want them to know is you've been killing us off for 400 plus years, and you haven't done it yet. So to keep fighting the system, but we are becoming what they fear most, and that is, why can't I get rid of them? Because you can't.
Well,
you simply cannot. I'm sorry. That's all I got to say. I'm just, to me, it's, you know, you can see to it as intelligently as you want to, but we can't fix them. And we certainly are not going to continue to become these submissive creatures that they would like us to be so they can think they are superior.
May I get your name again, please?
Sophia.
Yeah, Sophia, I really appreciate your comment. I think that it's important that we define who the them is, though, that we don't, someone earlier in a call said that there is something of a police gang. I think we shouldn't become anti-police, but identify what the them in the system is. Because the unfortunate thing is the police had the gun and was able to and shot as a result of a bias. But we have that same kind of embedded racism, not only in the police, in some of the police, but also in some of the private sector, some of the public sector.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Well, I'm sorry. I was saying that the them, I think, is not simply, or we can't lump all police into some sort of gang category that's against black people, because that's just simply not true. But I think what you're saying is true and is part of the truth of the American history, and that is that we have got to deal with systemic racism, that it plays itself in the psyche of American citizens. In this case, it was the police who had legally carrying a firearm. But in other cases, it's people who don't get promotion on jobs, people who get fired for no good reason, people who don't get the job. That, you know, it plays itself out in so many different ways in this good old boy system society, wherein African Americans just are often assumed not to be capable, to be drug addicts, to be this, that, and the other. And that's the frustration that we all feel. And we shouldn't just blame it all on the police. It's in American society, period. And yes, there are some that we identify in the police department.
Right. And I agree that the them need to be teased out.
Yeah.
But let us not be mistaken. The convolution of the them is because of them.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be bad apples in any profession. I don't think anybody in the world, there are some co-workers we probably would rather not work with them. So there are bad apples in
and some
every
of them black too, right?
Yeah, some of them black, some of them are blue. Some of them are orange. That was the last joke. I probably my last joke. All right.
Keep them coming.
Right. But the them has been convoluted by, and this is what I mean. Because there is a bad apple in the bunch, that doesn't mean the whole bunch gather around the bad apple.
Right.
That's when it becomes systematically problematic.
Yeah.
You're right. So if there is a police officer out there doing wrong to the extent of what we have seen that Sophia has articulated so well, the system, the other officer's supposed to be standing up and say, that goes against my profession. I don't agree with that. But they go radio silent. And so that's why the public has a very difficult time teasing out the them. So if everybody is quiet and everybody is okay, let's see what happens. If nobody is speaking out against the violence and nobody is saying that he's wrong and he should be arrested from that side, it convolutes the them. So we need to know who to point our fingers at. So just because you pulled the trigger does not mean that you're the only one that killed.
Well, see, I think that the issue, yeah, you're absolutely right, Dr. Perkins. I do appreciate that comment. I think that part of the teasing out has to be is what lenses do we look through when we evaluate this situation? You're a sociologist. You look through it through the lenses of that profession, social, relational, psychological, that whole piece. When I look at it from a moral, theological perspective. But like, for instance, I have friends who are lawyers. Any case that I bring to them, they start looking through this legal case.
Right, through law.
And so what we have with the police that you're saying are radio silent, they're looking through the lenses of their training that has told them that's what you do in that situation, or he's justified in that, rather than looking at it from a human, a moral, a sociological perspective. So what I'm saying is that because that training that people got that make them go radio silent, that's where racism is. That's affecting the community and it's undermining our humanity. And that's what I'm saying, that so then the moral voice need to speak up, the sociological voice need to speak up and say, there is something profoundly wrong with that system that made you believe that was okay. That's an evil system. We have a evil system that says that is okay. What happened to Philando Castie? That is evil. And I would say that on the mountaintop. That was evil.
Well, it's on this radio show. That's the mountaintop.
That's the mountaintop. All right, Sophia, thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
You guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Sophia.
No worries. I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break. I know that some of you are on hold. If you could just stay right there, stay put, put your phone on speaker. And turn the radio up, because I promise I will get back to you. This is a very brand new and live episode of Hampton Roads Voices. This episode is entitled Acquitted Once Again, the Philando Castie shooting. And we're talking about, just that, the acquittal, the shooting, how that makes us feel, the system, everything having to do with this particular conversation. We have two very special guest experts here. Dr. Robert Perkins, he's no stranger to this show. He's the chair of Norfolk State University Sociology Department. And we also have Dr. Antipas Harris here. He's a professor, a preacher, a community leader, among other things. So I'm going to tell you what, quick break. And when we return, we're going to come back with this great, intriguing conversation. But I want to hear from you. 823-9110. You may be on hold for a little while, but it's okay. Be patient. 823-9110. It is Hot 91. Psych, Hot 91, your choice for hip hop and R&B soul. Y'all thought y'all was listening to Marvin Gaye, huh? We gonna turn this thing off. Okay, time to get right back into a new live episode of Hampton Roads Voices. It is entitled Acquitted Once Again, the Philando Castie shooting. That's exactly what we're talking about. And this is a safe place for you, a safe environment, a platform for you to get those thoughts, those opinions out. And I want to thank the callers that have called so far and shared their thoughts and shared their opinions. I really appreciate it. So let's continue to get those calls coming. 823-9110. That's 823-9110. Or share your thoughts on Facebook and or Twitter using the hashtag HRV. Hashtag HRV. the. We have great special guest experts here, Dr. Antipas Harris, professor, preacher, and community leader, and also Dr. Robert Perkins. He's a chair of the Norfolk State University Sociology Department. And really quick, before we get all serious, shout out to Norfolk State alum class of 2014. Okay?
Yes, congrats.
Yes.
2014?
2014, a short 3 years ago. But you know what? It feels like a while to me.
Okay.
All right, so we do have a couple phone calls, and you've been waiting patiently, so let's go ahead and get into them. Hi, 91, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, how you doing? This is Elijah.
Hey, Elijah. I like your name.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Where's your question, comment, or concern?
I just wanted to speak on the case that we're talking about with the shooting.
Please.
The way I feel about it, okay, I'm 28 years old. I'm military, and actually I've been on all walks of life. You know, I've been poor. I've had nice things in my life. And the way I see it is that the things that's going on today, it's always been going on. It's never going to stop. You know, at one point in time, I was for the Black Lives Matter thing. You know, speaking about fighting for our rights and things like that. You know, marching and showing our cause. But how many times are we going to be marching? We've been marching since been marching. We have no soles on our shoes anymore, and I'm tired of it. Like, it's just like my grandfather used to tell me about things that happened in his day. And now it's just like the same thing's going on. And you look at the video, it's depressing. And it's just, they don't value us because I think one thing, we don't value ourselves because we buy into it. You know, they produce the poison and we buy into it. And I think another cause is that we're in a fatherless society. So with that being said, it's just like we don't really have a backbone. And I'm sad to say that, you know, and I respect moms who are, you know, single parents and things like that. But there's no father. So with no fathers, we have an imbalance, and that's why, you know, kids are acting irate, and that's why other races, you know, don't take us seriously for who we are. So when we get pulled over by the police, they're like, oh, this, you know, it's a bunch of clowns, a bunch of animals, and things like that. As far as for Fidel, you know, I have a license to carry too. That could have been me, and I'm a young black male as well. So it's a scary time. But the thing is, we actually need to, you know, to unite. We can't be divided anymore. We can't have our own sex, our own cliques, and things like that. Because enough is enough, and I'm tired of it. You know, and one day I'm gonna have kids, and I don't want my kids to go through the same thing that's been going on for like 400 years plus. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's 2017, and we're in America.
Well, Elijah, that's why you can't get tired.
Absolutely. The other thing, too, I think, Elijah, it's important that we African-American men speak into the lives of young African-Americans and let them know that they are beautiful. When you do, fathers speak identity and personhood and a sense of identity and a belonging, right, for kids. And if we have such an increased fatherless society, that absence there is present in many of our young people's lives. And I think this is a separate conversation from the Philando Castile specifically. But if we want to do more to help our community, to nurture our community in response to what you just said, I think that we need to really speak that black is beautiful. We gotta love our blackness. We gotta be comfortable in our black skin, you know, and comfortable in with our hair and our and the who we are.
Yeah,
we are beautiful, and let them know it. Because if you don't know you're beautiful, you look for that affirmation from other people, and if you don't get it from them, then there's a profound sense of insecurity that starts to set in. I remember when I first went to Africa, I picked up the dirt and kissed the ground, and I said, I'm home. I sent an email back to the United States to hundreds of people, and I said to them, I am home, and I'm proud to be in the motherland.
I love it
because I was finally able to be black and not have to worry about it. And it's more of a psychological thing, though, right? Because and that's what I'm saying. We got to find a sense of affirmation in where we are, and this has to do with fatherlessness, economic empowerment, education. It has to do with everything. Participation in the legal system. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and you know what? I think us as a people and just people in general do not really understand or wrap their head around how soon or how not too long ago our people was enslaved. If you look at, the histories, and I'm nowhere a historian or anything, I'm a mass comm major, okay? That's what I came out of. But if you take a look at, the history of nations, America in itself is a baby. We're young. These England and these in Spain and these kingdoms have been around for a lot longer than America. So when America came along and then slaves, and then, we just 400 years is not too long ago. So we have to rebuild. And just like you just listed all of these different factors, Dr. Harris, economics and education and family issues. And, it might not take, 400 years to rebuild a whole entire race and a whole different motherland. Because African Americans, that's a whole nother race in America. We're different from Africans. We're a new race. So, that's just something to think about.
But what Elijah said was so important in that. And Elijah, I just really appreciate you calling in and sharing your thoughts and your analysis, but more important, sharing you and where you are with this situation, because there are so many of us that are your age and younger that are feeling the way that you have just articulated. So you're speaking to a mountain of people. But I know Dr. Harris is the theologian, but I just have to go religion for just a little bit, and I'm going to back up before you get me together.
Down inside of you.
But it's that old hymn that my grandmother used to sing. And she said, I've been running for Jesus for a mighty long time, and I ain't got tired yet.
Wow.
And Elijah, I want you to really think about that, because that hymn came up through those times that you talked about with enslavement, 19th century slavery. And we can't get tired. And you might be right about the soles on shoes, but guess what? There are other methods. This is 2017. We have other ways of making our voices heard and making changes made. Now, the black dollar is a mighty dollar.
Absolutely.
A mighty dollar.
Absolutely.
And so we have to question whether or not we're allowing our best commodity that we have in our community to speak to social justice.
Yes.
That's something we need to think about. Maybe we need to start pulling back our dollars in certain venues that don't speak up against these type of injustices. For example, Pepsi had the audacity to make fun of Black Lives Matter movement and put one of the Jenner girls or the Kardashian, whatever, in it. These are things that we need to start thinking about. So, Elijah, maybe marching isn't for you, but please don't give up. Your voice need to be heard, and you got a huge opportunity to make an impact for other people that feel the way that you're feeling.
Yeah, and great point. I think broadly speaking, we're living in changing times. Caucasians were the majority, and they still are the majority mono community. But increasingly, we become by 2050, we're going to be a majority minority country. And when that happens, what happens is there is a sense or a need. If you're a majority for so long, you have a sense of loss of influence and power. So what we see, I think, even in this administration, is a quick desire to preserve whiteness. And that whiteness that I'm talking about is a historical whiteness. And so to do that, you double down, right? And what happens is that plays itself out in the criminal justice system, but it also plays itself out in the education system, in the private sector, particularly in the private sector, Virginia particularly, because it's an at-will state. And people don't get promoted, get fired, get hired, and it's all rooted in that desire to preserve whiteness. And so all at the same time, we have African Americans that just want to be a part of the broader community, that we don't align ourselves or support the HBCUs or the black businesses or the black, because we just want to be like everybody else. But the fact is, we are in a chronic situation, a crisis, where there is a force to want to preserve what I call whiteness.
Absolutely. And this is why Hillary Clinton was not elected. And we have our current president. And a lot of people said that. I think I saw an article, and the title of the article was a lot of voters voted Trump in because they were afraid of diversity. And of course, I'm on Twitter, so there's a whole bunch of millennials on Twitter, and somebody quoted it, commented on it, and said, "I'm sorry, you spelled racism wrong."
Oh, Lord.
Oh, no, you spelled something along those sorts. So people are afraid of diversity. They're afraid of the minority taking over. So yeah, let's hurry up and.
Well, that is very interesting. A very interesting point that you're making, because when I was at Iowa State, I was on the governor's diversity commission, and I was the only black African American male sociologist in that area. So I got a lot of invitations to be on a lot of different commissions and programs and what have you. But this one I accepted because I thought it was going to be extremely useful for African Americans to be a part of, or more of a part of, the society there in the state of Iowa. Long story short, when I got into the first meeting, they started talking about diversity and all this, and I stopped them. I said, wait a minute, what is your definition of diversity? Because I was confused. And they told me, bringing in more African Americans, Native Americans, Latinos, blah, 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 into the area. And I said, oh, you want more color.
Yeah.
That's a difference.
That's
Exactly.
a difference.
More color does not mean diversity.
Exactly.
And so when you bring in more color, you actually need to embrace a whole nother culture, a whole nother identity, a whole nother way of thinking, a whole nother way of dressing, and all that. And see, what they wanted was people of different colors that looked and think and act just like them. So they didn't want they didn't want diversity. They wanted more color.
Gotcha.
And so my thing is, if you want more color, just ask for it, but don't say it is diversity, because that's not what it is.
But the assumption is that it's diversity because we live in a society where, if you really, even here in Norfolk, it's a tale of two cities. The white experience, by and large, of being in Norfolk is completely different than the black experience.
Yeah.
So then, here's the issue: the black people have to go to the white people's world to work. White people never really have a need to go to the black people world, and so what happens is we actually have a peep into that, what I'm calling the white world, white city, a lot better than the people who are in the white. But the problem is that there's the people in the white who are talking about what diversity is, and the problem is they don't know what it is.
But let me say this. I know we got callers waiting, so we're going to get to the callers. But let me just say this, and I'll make it real brief. I did a study, a sociological study, and what I found at the end of my study was that white people can be born in America and live their entire life without coming into a significant interaction with an African American.
Absolutely. I believe that.
A black person could be born in America and cannot leave the hospital without without having a significant interaction with a white person.
Yeah.
Think about that.
And talk about the significant, because it doesn't mean shaking somebody's hand.
No.
They're your secretary. They
your
empty
janitor.
your trash,
Right.
things like that. We're not talking about that. You're talking about a significant interaction to that world.
Yeah, significant being based on I have to interact with this person in order to have good life chances.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Well then, and I know we kind of went left, but this is what we're really talking about. This episode is entitled Acquitted Once Again. We're talking about the Philando Castie shooting, and we're going to get right back on topic. Let's get to these phone calls, and hopefully it's on topic. Try to keep it on topic, okay? Hi, T1, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
So,
I'm sorry, who?
hello?
Hey, you're live on the air. Hot 91. Who am I speaking with?
Hi, my name is Joseph.
Hey, Joseph.
Okay, I have the unique perspective of having once been a police officer. In the academy, they are trained to think there's a mantra. I'm going home to my family tonight. That is a mantra with police officers. Also, they are woefully undertrained. Like in this area, you get 3 months in the academy, you get 8 weeks with a field training officer, and then you are kicked out to fly. You are kicked out of the nest to fly on your own and figure it out. Also, they have the culture is this. If you inform on an officer who is not living to what the standard should be, you are considered difficult to work with or a rat. Also, within the culture, there's a subculture where you have white officers that will say things like, I chased down a perp and the purpose, a young black male, said that he was 18 years old. I caught him. Was not bad for not bad for a middle-aged white male, slightly balding. They'll say things like that. And if you bring it up to a supervisor, you might be the one to find yourself in a disciplinary situation. But for the callers that said that racism will never stop or cannot be stopped, now that when I was younger, I might have believed that, but now that I'm in a different place and I've seen things and experienced being saved, you can change it, but it will take a generation or two. It starts with a curriculum of inclusion in the schools. Instead of pushed for a curriculum of inclusion, instead of the fallacy that Greece started everything, and Greece was the center of Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, cured 32,000 people in his lifetime, supposedly. Okay, where did he study? In Africa. But that is never brought up. They instead of there should be a push for education. Instead of Black History Month, it should be a curriculum of inclusion and teach all nationalities. Instead of Greece, instead go to the birthplace of civilization. Go to like ancient Ethiopia, places before Greek, the original Timbuktu, not what they call Timbuktu. Cities like Songhai, Kush, all of these things about Africa that are not taught. Teach about India, Vishnu. Teach history from the true beginning instead of the Grecian or European beginning. Teach from hello?
Yes.
Teach from a view of love and understanding rather than one of dominance and oppression and suppression. Because in American history, the history is taught differently in different parts of the country. In New York, you learn about the Union and the Confederacy. In Virginia, it's called Northern Aggression. And certain things are not taught correctly in Virginia to kids.
All right. Well, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate your comment. I think they want to say something.
Can I comment on that? Because I think you're getting at something there, and it's not always, I think, in school that the education needs to happen, but also in the community and the integration and the cross-pollination of cultures. I think that's an educational building better relationships as we become more diversified. And the reason I say that, connected to this particular case, is I think it's important that we don't dismiss the fact that this officer was not white. This officer was Mexican. And so what we have here, I think, what appears to be the case, is an adaptation of perspective about the black community. And I don't know enough about him to know where he was raised. I know he was Mexican, but I don't know where he was raised, what community he was raised in. But there's a perception that is consistent with this sort of white-black perception historically. So did he adapt this perspective? Did he learn this perspective that African Americans are somehow to be feared? What's going on here? And I really want to call out all of the Hispanic pastors and leaders to also speak up and out against these things. I think African Americans need to speak on the issue of immigration, but I also think that the Hispanic brothers need to, because they're the larger minority community these days, and we need a partnership in that community because we don't need them to take on those same attitudes that the majority white community has against black community. So I want to speak. I want to address that community and say, listen, we're a minority together, and the way it plays out, this racist history plays out in the Hispanic community is in immigration. But we don't want them to adapt those same visions about the African American community too. So I don't want to make this guy look like he was white because he wasn't.
But I never thought of him as being white, and I never thought of him as being Mexican.
But this conversation has been about white and black.
Well, For you. For me, even though we've been using those terms.
Clarified.
Right, I did not. But for me, it was really about white ideology and black ideology.
That's what I want to
white systemic racism and which end that people falls on the dichotomy of such.
Absolutely.
So therefore, I am very cautious about utilizing color. That's what I was saying earlier about being in Iowa and diversification. Because just because someone share the same skin color, it does not mean they share your agenda.
Absolutely.
Does not mean they share your vision of the world of a free and unbiased world. Those, and we
you
have
can be black.
We have
and adapt those kind of views.
Absolutely.
And we have faltered on that so much, and just because there was a black body that was in a police uniform that shot another black body does not mean that racism wasn't at play. Right. And I think that the larger scope indicates that, okay, since both parties were minorities, then it couldn't have been race. That is not true, because the problem is the actual ideology, the training, the system, and how all of those intersect to cause that particular violent moment. And exactly. So, and we capsulize it as black and white, but in earnest, it is really that ideology, and that alone needs to be deconstructed so that we can get our hands around. Now, let me tell you the real problem with that, because I'm staying on topic,
okay.
But this is just, if you look back into the institutional slavery, there were a lot of African Americans who were appointed to whip other African Americans. Now, did they do it because they want to do it? Probably not. Did they do it because that was the ideology and they were doing the job of the white society? Yes. So we cannot look at that behavior and say that it was black on black, so we shouldn't catalyze it as racism. It is still racism. Exactly. Now, going back to the gentleman's call and in terms of education and the case with Philando, something that I should have done at the onset of this show that I did not do, and I really want to take the opportunity to do it right now.
Please.
And that is to send a shout out and support to the family of Mr. Castile.
Yes.
We feel this. We feel it, and it's hurtful, it's painful.
Yes.
But they lost a child.
Yeah.
They lost a brother. And sometimes when things get to this level of analysis where there's so much conversations nationwide about it, we forget that that's a human being. Mm-hmm. We have a way of, I don't know how, epitomizing it, if you will. And we get away from the actual individual. So I want Mr. Officer Yanez know that he took somebody's son. He took their son. And that cannot be overshadowed. It cannot be overshadowed. So you don't get a pass because you thought something.
Yeah.
And we have to do better about that. But anyway, my prayers go out to their family. And I know when that verdict came down, it must have felt like they lost that child all over again. It must have.
Well, I mean, that's a double whammy. You lose a son, it's nothing that can replace that son. But when the perpetrator is deemed guiltless by a system that is sworn to protect, that's why the African American community so often feel disempowered, and why African Americans oftentimes just don't even participate because they don't feel like their participation matters. But I want to encourage you that your voice matters, and you should make a noise, even if you have to get on Twitter and Facebook. And I mean, there's a lot of mechanism. Listen, the President of the United States tweeting stuff.
Right.
So anyway, we're
not going to go
there. But I'm saying that's a mechanism that is not reserved for the President of the United States. You may not have a college degree, you may not have a high school diploma. You can have a Twitter account and you can make your case and keep making it and don't allow anybody to mute your voice, because that's the other thing. That's why I talk about economic empowerment. We need economic empowerment for a lot of reasons. One, because African Americans have this yes'm mentality that because they have a white system that pays their bills, somehow they have to not say what they feel. That's a problem.
Yeah.
In a country that you're supposed to have freedom of speech. So anyway, I digress. What the point is that this young man was killed. And he was acquitted. That means that it can be done again.
Oh, of course. Of course.
I'm like, come on, people.
That was Dr. Harrishaw.
That was me. It can be done again. And I'm like, it's been done over and over and over again. Yeah. And it's like, what's happening? Here's the problem. Here's one of the problems, that it almost looks like African Americans are not real human. We're dispensable.
Absolutely.
I'm we're not dispensable.
It's been time and time again that we've seen African Americans killed in the street, killed in their cars, killed minding their own business by law enforcement, by those who thought they were law enforcement and try to take law into their own hands. I mean, the message is clear. I think after the second time, it was too much. But now we're here that we know of, probably at the 10th time now. And I think the message is
way more than that.
Yeah. The message is loud and clear now that African American lives are dispensable.
But here's the thing is
not valued.
Well, here's the thing. Well, a brother said earlier, what can we do? We need to see our brothers and affirm their humanity. Don't hurt your own brother. Don't adapt a mindset that seems to be pervasive in our society, that African American are dispensable, and turn on each other as if we are dispensable. No, I care about you.
All right.
And I want to see you. I care about everything about yourself. And even if I don't like you, I'm not, listen, you one of me. So we need to stop this self-hurt, self-hate community, turning on each other, jealous of each other because you got promoted. Brother, if you get promoted, I'm happy because you are connected to me. See, when I was in Africa, I learned this principle. It was called Ubuntu. Ubuntu says, I am because we are. See,
I am because we are.
That means that the only way I exist is because of community. And I am out of community and I'm sent to community.
You know what? A guy from my church visited Ghana and he came back with that same sense of community.
I'm trying to tell y'all.
When you uplift the community, you uplift yourself, you uplift the other person, of course, because of community. Yeah, so that's a good point. That is a good point. Keeping the phone lines going. What we're talking about right now, the show is entitled Acquitted Once Again, the Philando Castile shooting. Okay, I have Dr. Robert Perkins here. I have Dr. Antipas Harris here, and we are talking about how to make sure that this doesn't happen again. That's what we're about to talk about. So we're going to take a quick break. If you're on hold, please continue to do so. Just hold for really quick. And if you want to be on hold to get your questions, your comments, your opinions, your feelings out on this platform in which you won't be judged, you'll be very safe, go ahead and give us a call, 823-9110, 823-9110. Quick break, and then we will be back. It's Hot 91, Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91, your choice for hip hop and R&B soul. Hampton Roads Voices is here. Khilo is here. Dr. Robert Perkins is here. Dr. Antipas Harris is here. And we are talking about the Philando Castie shooting. This episode is entitled Acquitted Once Again. Now, the conversation kind of went into black and white, and it's kind of hard not to do that with, so many African Americans being shot in cold blood. However, we're trying to make it more injustice, okay? Systematic, is it a race thing? Is it not a race thing? We're trying to make sure all of our opinions are heard. So let's be clear, Hampton Roads Voices is now all about we for the black man only, right. And and nobody else matters. So let's just throw that out there. The views and the opinions of the callers, of our guest special experts here, even myself, they do not reflect Norfolk State University or Hot 91, the station. So let's be clear. So with that being said, we've been hearing a whole lot of calls, that are saying the system is against us as in the black community. But I want to hear from other races, okay? Any Caucasians, white people, any Latinos, Latinas, Asian people, anybody, let's play devil's advocate. Do you feel as though this acquittal was justified? Do you feel it was legitimate? Do you have different views? We want to hear from you. This is not a place where we're going to beat you up, okay? 823-9110, 823-9110. Fellas, you feeling all right?
Yes, yes.
All right, awesome. Let's get back to the phone calls. Hi, 91, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with? Hi, 91, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
No worries. Hello there. Which are you anonymous?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I work in criminal justice system. So.
Okay, no worries. Go ahead and share your opinion.
First of all, I want to express sympathy for the Castile family. Number one. Number two, I want to praise your guests over there. They have a variety of view about the topic, and I'm very impressed. But we have different aspects that intersect in this conversation. So I'm gonna do what we call a backward design. I heard one of your guests come up with a very solid point economic independence. That is the number one key solution. So the backward design, I'll start from the back, come back to the top. Economic independence is the number one issue. America fears economic power. The only way America responds to situations is when they face economic pressure, be it abroad or, within the country. So the blacks have to watch where their dollars go and respond to companies that don't treat them or support the ideology of, I'll call it quote-unquote suppression. Now, going backward, talking about the solution, I would say the cause of this situation, we have a matrix here where blacks, whites, and other minorities are involved in the law enforcement. So it's not tactical, it's not only a black and white issue. It's an issue of mentality and the institution, the politics. Greek philosophers talk about crutches. Politicians rely on the law enforcement as crutches to do their dirty jobs. You listen to Fox News, they talk about, Bill O'Reilly used to talk about pinheads and patriots. Who are the patriots? Patriots to them are the ones that do the dirty jobs and obey the politicians. Those are their patriots. So they define this society based on whom they want to identify as a patriot. So the politicians, they rely on the crutches, who are the police, the law enforcement officers, to do their dirty jobs. And so they praise them and talk about how good their jobs are. They don't try to differentiate between the bad ones and the good ones. So we always have the generalization of bad police officers being put together with the good ones. And unfortunately, the good police officers have acquiesced in this situation and act like the bad ones too, or they fail to respond to the bad things that the bad officers do. So, once more, I believe that the blacks have to respond accordingly, identify the corporations that help to spread this mentality of, political, domination that came as far back as the Greeks and the Romans. The Romans were, kind of a society where the males were dominant, and the males still dominate the politics in America today, and they're the ones that do, coming back to law, there's what we call the positive law and the natural law. Okay. Now, we are more concerned with the natural law. We blacks, I would say, and the minorities concerned with the natural law. The positive law was written by politicians in the parliament, in Congress. Okay, so they're the ones that write the laws that guide us. They don't abide by the natural law. Just like one of your guests was saying, the law is not always just. Law is not just. So just to make things short, you have to make sure that you respond with your dollar power. Don't support the companies that support these wild political politicians. Okay, I'm just going to cut it there, right there. Okay.
Well, thank you for your comment.
Can I just say one thing? I want to say a shout out actually to Chief Larry Boone here in Norfolk Police Department. Norfolk, the police department is working very hard, and they have done a great job in trying to build a relationship with our community. Mm-hmm. They have even initiative. If you complain to them, they find a way to get you involved in the solution. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a model. In fact, I think it's a model for the country. Not to suggest that other states or cities don't have similar proactive policing. But I specifically want to say that because I'm involved with the police department. We talked about the FIP, but we also, the clergy patrol, and I think I mentioned that earlier, where they are building these relationships. Yes, we have great chaplains in the police department, but the clergy patrol is distinctive because it draws upon the pastoral leaders who in the pulpit every week have great influence in our community. particularly in the black community, the church still is a town hall of the community. You know, and some of the pastors of large churches around here, from I don't even want to get into calling names, but I will say
Gethsemane, because you know he's
Gethsemane, Pastor Kirk Houston, Bishop Courtney Macbeth, Pastor Jim Wood, Pastor Eric Hughes, Pastor Jack Howell. All these guys are involved in the clergy patrol, and others. They're black, they're white, they're stepping up to the plate to say, you know what, the religious community has a part to play in helping be the solution to the problem in our community. And we're grateful to our police department, Chief Larry Boone, who spent all of his time trying to figure out how to do it better. And the challenge is that when national issues happen, it pressures the local community, the local police, because now they have to work harder to distinguish themselves from bad police. So I think it's important that we highlight that. That's why I was saying earlier, we don't want to create, while we talk about these issues and criticize or critique these issues nationally, we don't want to turn into anti-law enforcement, because that will undermine the community.
Yeah,
and I too want to give a shout out to Chief Boone, Chief Larry. I call him Terminator, and I know he's a friend of the show. So if he's listening, big ups to Chief.
Hey, Chief Boone.
Yeah.
All right, we're in the home stretch here of this episode entitled "Acquitted" once again, and I believe we have two calls. If you're listening and you're on hold, please, we appreciate your calls, but try to get to the point a little bit more quickly. Okay.
But you know what? The anonymous caller, he made some really solid points about economic empowerment and how that we can start turning the tables about how African Americans are viewed when we go on in our normal day activities. So when we encounter the police, which is going to happen, just maybe we're viewed a little differently. That can presuppose some of the things that's happened in the past.
Absolutely. Hi, 91, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
My name is Shane.
Hello there. What's your comment, question, or concern?
Okay, so I just want to thank y'all for having this conversation, and many like this one. This topic with Philando, I'm enraged. I'm angry.
I'm sorry, caller, can you speak up a little bit? We're losing you.
With this topic with Philando, I am enraged. It angers me. And I heard his mom speak, and I just felt her pain through her anger. And I really think that this is the issue of, I don't want to say race, it's not black or white. I would say that it's black and blue. It's again, an issue with black people and police officers. And I think that relationship needs to be mended. How? I'm not really sure. I think that there's so many issues, trust issues within our community with the police department, that it's kind of a hard relationship to mend, especially with an instance like this with Philando. I mean, it was a complete overreaction, you know, and I do understand that he's human, you know, but when he put on that suit of armor and say, hey, I'm going to be a police officer to protect and defend, there's no more, I don't feel protection for our community. It's more of, I feel like I have to protect myself. I used to see a police officer and feel like, okay, I'm going to be safe. And now it's like, are you going to be the one to hurt me? You know, and I just really think that we need to find a way to mend the relationship with the black community. So really my question is how do you all think that we really mend that?
Yeah, that is the big question. Caller, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
My name is Shane.
Shane. You know, before we go into the remedies and responding to your question, I just want to thank you for calling in, because the passion that you have came through, and you have spoken for so many black mothers out there that are trying to find ways to negotiate their lives of their sons so they won't wind up in this similar situation as Mr. Castile's mother. So I want to thank you for not only what you said, but how you said it. It came through so clearly. But to answer your question, there are so many different truths and remedies that have been discussed and talked about over time that try to build better relationship. But the truth of the matter is that it's going to take everybody, all hands on deck. Everybody has to be part of the solution. Everyone. And it doesn't necessarily start with just the communication between a black person in a community, and a police officer. It has to be a holistic approach. It has the education system have to become more involved, as the gentleman, the anonymous caller, talked about. The criminal justice system from all angles have to be a part of it. Community have to be a part of it from all angles, whether we're talking about faith-based organizations, whether we're talking about academia, whether we're talking about K through 12 systems. We all have to have our hands on deck. I believe, and this is going to sound, Shane, this is going to sound so overly simplistic, but I truly believe this. We need to just love each other a lot more and respect the fact that we are here in this universe, in this space and time at the same time. The fact that we are here means that we are champions, that we have overcome a lot, regardless of race, because everybody, and this is something I tell my students all the time, everybody has a story.
Yes.
Everybody has a story. So let's get together and share our stories and respect our stories and respect how we got here today. And we have to, on both sides, start giving more time and effort to understanding each other.
Yeah.
Now, I know you were probably expecting some great academic response, but and you know, those things will come to pass as well. But we first have to be open enough to receive each other. And because if we all shut down and we all are closed, this is not going to get any better.
Right.
Because we all have a part in this.
Yeah, and the thing about the African American community historically has been a community that has participated in the solution. Now, I don't mean every single African American, but I do mean when I think about civil rights movement, the issue was how do we fix the problem in the face of evil? And it was the black community that came together with a nonviolent approach with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. leading, and that really, in a large part, won the day. My point is that we can actually, you mentioned some great points, but I just want to, self-responsibility. I think self-responsibility is key to this as well. We can say, listen, we live in an evil world, but we can take responsibility to change it. King did it. Several other people did it throughout history. We can do it.
Yeah.
We can actually be the answer that we're looking for in a big way. See, the visceral response would be, oh, burn down the city. Oh, all police are gang members. Oh, this, that, and other. That doesn't solve any problems. We have a history of being able to solve problems. So we can do that.
Yeah.
I agree, but I just have to say this too.
You gotta disagree somewhere.
You know me, brother. You know me. But it's not a big disagreement. Actually, it's not even a disagreement with what you said. But back then, in the King days, we knew who the black community were. When you said black community, we knew we were talking about HBCUs. We knew we were talking about the Southern Leadership Conference, the black faith-based organizations. We knew who we were talking about. In today's vernacular, who is the black community? Who we have become such a deconstructed community until we don't really know how to define it. We don't know where the boundaries are. We don't know how to define what is black anymore. We don't know what organization is down for the agenda and which organization is not. And it's not that we're more diversified, because we've always been diversified, but back then we knew that we had these organizations that would set aside the agenda for black progress, and we knew what the agenda was. Today, not so much.
Now, we do have two more calls, and we only have a couple minutes left. So, Shane, thank you so much for your comment.
Later, right? Thank you all.
All right, and let's get to these calls. Unfortunately, we're not taking any more calls, but we are going to take these last two.
Thank you for the call.
Hi, 91. You're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
This is Darrell.
Hey, Darrell. Can you share your comment, question, or concern, sir?
Yeah, wonderful. I'm a local business owner, and what I've noticed, and when I hear this whole conversation, I hear that we need a platform, because we need a platform, a gathering base, or some type of something to get our voices heard. And right now, the largest platform that we have is the black church, period. And number one, when you look at the church, and I'm going to speak this, we've been jumping for Jesus for 400 years, okay? Not to mention the miseducation process that has come with that, okay? And that we need to find out, who our identity. We don't know who we are, our true identity. And so, therefore, we don't have love for self, because we don't know who we are in this land that we've been brought to. So with that being said, once you know your identity, then it will create a love for self. It will create a love for purpose. Why am I here? I come from kings. I come from queens, you know, and so now I have a responsibility because I know who I am at this point. And so we don't know who we are. A lot of us don't. And unfortunately, our leaders are not really teaching that. And I know for myself personally, I've dedicated my life to teaching people entrepreneurship, how to turn their gifts and talents into business, because economics is what we need. Because, you know, and I'll say this and I'm done. Thank you for your time, and I'm glad you have a platform. Because what's happening is, as black males, just speaking for males myself, we go to jobs, we're not able to voice how we feel, but because we're in a system that really does not care too much for us. And so with that being said, we have to hold our emotions in and all this kind of stuff, and we have to wear a mask because we don't know who we are when we go to these jobs day to day, all this kind of thing. But when we understand entrepreneurship, that God or Yahweh has given us creativity to turn that creativity into passion, which means we can leave what the scripture talks about, leaving generational wealth for our children's children. And that's what I dedicated my life to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Our last call, Hot 91, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with?
Hi, this is Dennis.
Hey, Dennis. What's your comment, question, or concern, sir?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as a Caucasian male, from what I've seen from the police force and the black community, they might not be this way for all so-called white folks, but for a Caucasian that lives in a black community, interracial relationships, and who will one day be raising children who will be deemed by certain other people as black because they're going to have black features. These police force, their methods are appalling. They're ancient, their methods. And I think for an officer to say that he killed another man out of fear really speaks to the level of training that these officers are getting before they're thrown out into the street. And I haven't really heard a whole lot of solution thrown out there as to how we can create better officers for our communities. I do think that we can have more African-American faces in the police force to better represent the communities in which they're patrolling. They can relate to people better, and we can eliminate this whole inexcusable excuse of fear. It's ridiculous. We got to remember that the last word in the word community is unity. And if we can't all come together and put God back into this country, our country is going to fall victim to itself, be it racism, classism, or what other isms you can come up with to segregate and separate the people of this nation. And with that, I'm going to let you guys have your show back.
Wow.
Thank you.
That was so powerful. What was his name again? Seth? Hello, caller?
Dennis.
Okay.
I don't know where I got Seth from.
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Dennis, thank you so much for your call. That was awesome. And I really believe that is the whole resolution track. Now, I will say this, though. The FIP group that we often refer to throughout the program, they are working in concert with the police to create some solution. And we hit on a lot of the things that Dennis just brought up in our group. And we're going to have an open forum meeting for the community, anybody involved in community, to understand the progress that we have made with the policies and the procedures within the police department to create more social justice so these things can stop happening. And I concur with him 100% that we need to focus on the training more, and we have been within that particular concept. I'm just very happy that Dennis brought up those points, because one of the things that I've been hell-bent on is this whole idea of fear. How do you quantify fear? And I have not gotten the answer for it. It's not quantifiable. It's qualifiable, but not quantifiable, and that itself is a problem. Because I expect all professionals, when they get into tight situations or nervous situations or any type of situations, to lean on their training, not their emotions, but their training.
Yeah.
So what Dennis said is very powerful. And we're going to broadcast it. And if you will, Khilo, I would love to share with you those dates that we're going to have that community forum, and you can broadcast it to our listening audience. and have them to show up so they can hear. And not only can they hear what is going on, they have an opportunity to exchange with the group, including the community leaders and the police. So it'll be
absolutely.
A great event.
Dr. Perkins is known to have events that offer solutions, and Dennis says he hasn't heard a lot about solutions about how to make better officers, but these are what those forums are all about. Bring your kids, bring your boo thing, make it a nice date night or a family night. Or I sure did to get there and to
Dr. Harris.
Hey, can I say one thing though in addition to that, and that is that policing historically, we talk about historically as in many years ago, but I mean just in terms of recent years, policing was, you call the police when something happens, so they show up. Now policing has to be more community oriented. In other words, the officers who serve the community need to be fully present in that community, making relationships. And we see that in Mike Brown. We see that in Philando Castile. You got to say, this officer must have not been in this community to know that this guy's well-known, well-liked, to know his character, to have, if you're that known and the police officer don't know anything about you, I would question what type of policing is happening. That's one question. So I think one of the things that Norfolk Police Department is doing is the police are more involved in the community. They're having cookouts. They're having
community days.
As a citizen, you have an opportunity to ride along to experience what they're experiencing. Well, you can do that as a citizen. We do it as Commercial Patrol, but you can do it as a citizen.
Yes,
you can be proactive in building that relationship. The police serve our community, so they have a responsibility to us, but we also should, this is what I mean by personal responsibility. We can step up and say, hey, y'all, I want to make sure if I call you to my house, nobody in here gets shot for no reason.
Exactly, and we pay them tax dollars.
Right.
Okay?
So show up and have coffee with them. Show up at the, be proactive. Get up. Who is the chief? You should know the chief. And at that point, it does hold them accountable, but it also changes the relationship between the police and the community.
Yeah, and this conversation can go on and on, but I know that our time is now cut short. We kind of went over a little bit, but that's okay. A great conversation. Really quick, Dr. Perkins?
Yeah, it's going to be real quick.
Okay.
I just have to give a shout out to my partner in crime, Dr. Warren, who's usually with me.
Hey, Dr. Warren.
He's in Mississippi right now, visiting family, so I just wanted to... He better be listening. I know he got the internet. So we want to give a shout out to him. And his daughter is now a Spartan.
Oh,
yes. She's,
a new Spartan.
Yeah, but not give her name out because her colleagues or peers might try to say, oh, Dr. Perkins. So,
yeah. So I do want to thank you, Hampton Roads, for calling in and sharing your thoughts and your questions and your ideas. Or even if you didn't call in, thank you for having us on your radio, in your businesses, in your cars, in your homes. This is what this show is all about, to get you thinking, to get you talking, to get you involved in our community and in our issues, okay, and also in our solutions. So the dot to this is for you to follow us on Facebook at Hot 91 WNSB Hot 91.1 FM to look out for those forums that we're going to be putting out about those events and things of that nature, so that you can come out and you can hear those solutions. All of these calls we just got. Okay, show up. Put your money where your mouth is. All right. I want to thank Dr. Robert Perkins, the chair of Norfolk State University Sociology Department and very great friend of the show, and also Dr. Antipas Harris. He will be back. Okay, professor, preacher, community leader, and I think I'm going to have you back for a show having to do with what is the faith communities doing for our communities, to get...
Oh, that's right up your alley.
That's right up his alley. So he will be back, okay? And yes, like the earlier caller said that he would like to refer back to these episodes later. So you know what? Just give me a minute. I'm going to try to do a YouTube channel or a podcast or something of that sort so that you can come back and digest and really get into these conversations, okay? While you're at it, go ahead and follow me at Kilogram, at KHILO Graham on Instagram. And how can they get in contact with you fellas?
Well, they can contact me at Norfolk State University, Dr. Perkins, in the Sociology Department. Email rkperkins@nsu.edu. Our phone number is 757-823-8436.
823-8436.
All right. I'd like for you to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, Snapchat too. All at DRANTIPAS. Again, that is at DRANTIPAS. One third time. At DRANTIPAS. At Dr. Antipas. And that's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And also my website is www.antipasharris.com or www.theurcnorfolk.com. That's the Urban Renewal Center.
Well, if you decide to follow Dr. Harris, you will not be disappointed. This man is awesome. That's my brother.
Thank you. You are too.
All right. So coming up next, we do have a weekend mix trying to get you, ready for your weekend. So I need you to keep it locked to right here. Oh, and don't forget, we do also broadcast this show on Sundays as well. So you tune in on Fridays at 5.